Climate change and our environmental challenges are one of the biggest existential threats to our way of life. Today is also the day that we choose to assert ourselves as a global leader in transitioning to 100% renewable energy and charting that path.
Well, it's pretty ambitious. The resolution has environmental and economic goals, including, get this, a government guaranteed job upgrade, a guaranteed government job, an upgrade of every building in America, college education for everybody, health care for everybody, and the elimination of airplanes while they're at it in 10 years. You can bet our panel has a lot to say about this. We have Christina Partsenevelos, Liz Peek, Jonathan Hoenig, and Gary Kalpman also joining us in a Fox Business exclusive from Capitol Hill. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, he is chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, also serves on the Senate Judiciary, Budget, and Tax Committees. Senator, what I didn't mention was she also talks about eliminating cows in the next 10 years, or at least cows, forgive me, but she said this, that pass gas. Now, I don't know of any cows that don't pass gas, but you come from a farm state, forgive me, but she says this. What do you think your farming constituents would say about it?
It sounds to me like we have a member of the House of Representatives who kind of believes or knows this about food. Food grows in supermarkets, not on farms. And the problem we have is only 2% of the people in this country produce food and know what it takes to produce food, and the 98% don't know as much about it as they should, and you get stupid comments like that.
Well, this is what Representative Cortez had to say on the investment and the dollars that have to do with the Green Deal. Let's go to it.
This is an investment. You know, for every $1 that we spend on infrastructure, we get a return on that investment. For every $1 that we spend on tax cuts, we get less than $1 back. And so this is about making smart investments, and this is about making investments that actually generate returns.
So, Senator Grassley, basically she is saying that you give her $7 trillion, she'll return more than $7 trillion, but tax cuts don't work well. What is your take on that?
The federal government consumes. It doesn't create wealth. The wealth is created in the private sector. The government is a service. It doesn't produce a profit. It doesn't create jobs that create new investment and new productivity that expands our economy. Her direction would take us down the road of an economy that's pretty constant, and how do you divide it up so more people have less? I'm interested in creating a growing economy where there's more for more people.
Senator Grassley, if I could pivot to the upcoming investigations and conversations about drug pricing, do you and your colleagues have any kind of plan going in? You're going to hopefully sit down with the heads of the drug companies. Do you have a particular approach that you're going to take to try and lower costs, that you're going to try and get them to buy into, or how are you approaching this?
It sounds like a facetious answer, and it's kind of a one-word answer: transparency. There's too much secrecy in health care. There's not enough information out there for the consumer to compare prices and make a choice, make a wise decision that's cost effective. By too much secrecy, you know, when you go to a grocery store, you would pay the same for an apple as I would pay for an apple. When you go to take care of doctors or hospitals or you know, MRIs and all that stuff, you don't really know. Now, it's supposed to be out there, and some regulations put it out there for greater transparency, but there's too much secrecy within the big pharma, within the PBMs, and to what extent does a lot of these rebates help the consumer? You know, there's $165 billion of rebates, I think, last year. How much of that benefited the consumer? I would think that we ought to be thinking about the consumer, and for me, as a person that's chairman of the committee that has jurisdiction over Medicare and Medicaid, two very expensive programs, I got to think about what the taxpayers are paying, maybe more than they should be paying.
Senator Grassley, it's Jonathan Hoenig. Thank you for being with us. You know, AOC is gaining in popularity. The Republicans' traditional message, at least, of limited government, fiscal restraint. Sir, after, you've been in Washington since 1980, why does that seem to be as unpopular now, even with many on the right, as it historically has been?
Or you mean about the stuff I've been talking about, health care? Is that what
sir,
you're...
that is to say, limited government, fiscal restraint. I mean, the debt is as big as it's ever been. Government is as big as it's ever been.
Okay.
You've been in Washington for decades. Why are you, in effect, losing the fight?
Well, we're losing the fight because we don't have the same requirements that most states have, that you have to have a balanced budget. That's why I voted 3 or 4 times in the years I've been in the United States Senate for a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget. I served in the state legislature a long time ago, but we still have that same fiscal discipline in the legislature of Iowa because we have such a constitutional amendment. And if you're asking me why we don't get back to it, we responded to a grassroots effort of concern about the response of the infrugality of spending in Washington. And I wish we'd get it cranked up at the grassroots. You're in the grassroots. You're encouraging other people in the grassroots to raise that. I hope that they get that elevated to Congress so we can get more action in that direction.
Senator Grassley, this is Christina Parts-Nevelis, and I just want to go back to your other comment about the government providing a service. I agree with you in that sense because you need an environment where you have an educated and healthy working class population. However, although I think that the Green New Deal is a very lofty deal, there's no details on how they can fund it. You even have some Democrats that really aren't taking to it. Nancy Pelosi said that it was the Green Dream or whatever they call it. So clearly she's dismissing it a little bit. But don't you think that this is an opportunity for the United States to move forward with green technology? Or maybe we should be moving forward so we can take this technology and then market it around the globe, create jobs for millions of people within the country as opposed to burning coal 100 years from now.
Yeah, we have been moving in that direction very dramatically since the 1980s. Now, it doesn't show up nationally with a lot of our electricity, for instance, being generated by alternative energy, but you're speaking to the father of the wind energy tax credit. We're getting 38% of our energy from wind in Iowa now. One company, Mid-America, is telling us in 5 years they're going to get 88% of their electricity from wind. But you can't just depend upon the sun always shining, the wind always blowing. So I always say you have to have a four-part approach to energy generally. One, we're still going to have to rely upon fossil fuels for a long period of time. We ought to have all the alternative energy you can think of, like your question implies. Third, we're still going to have some nuclear, and nuclear is very clean, as you know. And then lastly, we got to promote conservation. I can tell you a lot of ways you can promote conservation, and you got to have some of that. And a lot of that's coming, some of it's coming through government regulation, when you have more efficient home appliances, more efficient cars, etc. But you got to have a four-part program. You can't just have alternative energy be the sole reliant, at least today. Now, maybe in 2050, it'll be a different story.
Senator, kind of pulling back to what Jonathan was talking about, and the general feelings about socialism and capitalism. Socialism is still a dirty word in America. I mean, most Americans by 2 to 1 think it's a dirty word, but more and more people are drawn to it, particularly young people. Does that concern you?
You know, it's just a perfect example. We don't teach enough history and learn from previous generations in America today because we're too much interested in in political correctness, and I don't know how many other things we poison the people's brains in our K through 12 education, and even in universities. You get the idea that the government's got the answer to every question. Like 535 members of us in Congress ought to have more brains than the other 300 million people in this country put together, and you know that, and I know that's not true. But all you got to do is look to history. Now, I'm answering your question. All you got to do is look to history and look at what's happened in socialism. In Venezuela right now, 3 million people have left the country. People are starving to death. You can't get medicine. Why would anybody in America want to recreate what's happening in Venezuela?
Chairman Grassley, we love your point of view. We wish you would come back and talk to us soon. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Appreciate it.
You ought to, if you want me to come back, you ought to ask me more.
We'll ask you once a week if you don't mind. I hope you're not shy. We'll be asking you a lot. It's great to talk to you, Senator. Thank you.